So except for the members of our audience who have not done their fellow or specialist projects yet, we all wish we could be fellows or specialists forever because we fear we'll never find a more exciting opportunity. I am thrilled to introduce 4 panelists who are hiring managers in the TESOL field. They will share their insights and tips for how to find and land professional opportunities, which will help you continue to make a difference. Here is our schedule for the day. We have an optional small group discussion and sharing session at 1 p.m. So if you have to leave before then, we understand, but we hope that you'll stick around and continue the conversation with our community members. With that, I am delighted to introduce our panelists. Our first is Kevin Brown, who was an English language fellow in Togo from 2007 to 2009, and he is currently the Chief of Operations at HR Innovate. Kevin, we're excited to learn more about you and your background. Can you tell us a little more?
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. Like I said, I'm Kevin. I'd like to thank you for inviting me here today, and I'm thrilled to be with this great team. Just a little bit of background. I started my career as a trainer in HR. Through that, I really wanted to delve further into the field of education. I got my master's and taught public school. I became an English language fellow in Togo. From there, I worked for 5 years as the Associate Peace Corps Director of Costa Rica. I did acting tours, Deputy Director in Guatemala and Colombia as well. I went on to be the National Trainer at the Department of Labor. And now I own my own HR and recruiting company in Nicosia, Cyprus, which is where I'm calling from today.
Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you. Next, I am delighted to introduce Jillian Hessler, who is an English language specialist in Indonesia in 2016 and an English language specialist in South Africa in 2017. Jillian is currently the director of ESL at North Carolina State University. We're very glad to welcome you and invite you to share more about yourself.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I am just honored, or as we would say here in the South, tickled pink to be on this panel. My career, that's interesting. I've always been enthralled with the business of learning. I was a student for a long time. I have 2 master's degrees, and then I got a doctorate, which I really didn't originally want to get, but I did. And I finished graduate school at the ripe age of 35, and then went to the International TESOL conference in Chicago to look for a job. And there I was hired to go to Barcelona and teach English at the Institute of North American Studies. And that position basically led to another position, which was in Madrid. And then the Madrid position led me back to North Carolina. So that's basically has been my career path, that one position led to another, each time higher in rank, responsibility, and pay scale. Oh, I should talk about these pictures, for goodness sake. This was my, my specialist assignment in Indonesia. What a beautiful country. And I had the pleasure to work with 2 elves. And one was, to the right was Sultan Stover. And we met at a conference. And then the one to the left is Yuta Otake, and there I am with him and his colleagues in a store that sold beautiful textiles.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm delighted to introduce our third panelist, Jeff McElvena, who was an English language fellow in Paraguay from 2016 to 2018 and a specialist in Angola in 2018. He is currently the Director of Academics at Pace University in New York. Jeff, we're delighted that you're here and invite you to share a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all today. I agree with Emily. We do kind of all wish we could just be a fellow for life and just, or at least I wish I could just kind of hop around every 2 or 3 years and see where I end up. So my kind of trajectory was that I basically started off teaching overseas with the Peace Corps, and then I found a university that was starting up actually in Iraq, and I stayed there for a long time, and I learned a lot about the whole process of building a university, building a program, getting it accredited, which then led me into my fellowship right after that. And speaking of the fellowship, here are just a couple of photos from that. On the left, you'll see a picture of me in Chile. I was there visiting the other fellow there, and this is obviously in American spaces there. I did a workshop on assessment. And on the right is TESOL International in Chicago. Maybe some of you guys went there. This is with the cultural affairs assistant from the embassy. He and I worked together to sort of revive the TESOL organization in Paraguay, and we did a poster presentation on that process and important things to think about. So I look forward to hearing from the other panelists and from everyone in the audience today.
Thank you so much, Jeff. We're so grateful that you're here with us. And last but definitely not least, I'm thrilled to introduce Nicholas Taggart, who is an English language fellow in Oman from 2012 to 2013, and he is currently the director of the Intensive English program at the University of Dayton. Let's learn more about you, Nicholas.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here and happy to share with you and be a part of this panel. As Emily mentioned, I was a fellow in the Sultanate of Oman, and here are a couple of pictures of me with the Vice Chancellor presenting me with the plaque after having finished my post. And the two other gentlemen immediately to my left is the director of the Center for Continuing Education, where I worked, and the office manager as well. And then the picture on the right is me with the ambassador to Oman at that time, Greta Holtz, and I got a chance to interact with her on a couple of occasions while I was doing my fellowship, one when she came to visit the city that I was in and did a tour. And then later on, we were invited to come to the embassy to do some presentations. So it was a really great experience. My trajectory in this career, as you were told, I'm an administrator, director, has been kind of odd. I actually just volunteer work originally at a nonprofit as an English conversationist, and actually have a degree in mathematics. And after I finished, I wanted to get a little bit of travel time. So I wanted to go to the Far East, and it was, how can I subsidize that? And that's how I got into the profession. And then returned back and got a degree in linguistics. I got sucked into administration, and I've been stuck here ever since.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. So now we are going to have discussion with our panelists. And if any of our guests today have questions at any point, please feel welcome to ask questions in the chat. We will have a time at the end of the presentation where our panelists will answer some of those questions. But in the moment, if something comes to mind, please write it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you and keep this as engaging and interactive as possible. So, our first question is about career trajectories and how you got to where you are today. I know this was touched on a little bit in your intros, but Kevin, could you briefly describe your career trajectory and how you got to where you are today?
Sure thing. I think it's important to say early on in my career, I sat down and mapped out what I wanted my career path to look like. And so I tried to dream as big as I could and imagine the coolest job I could ever have, which was working with the Peace Corps. And I printed out a list of all the requirements, which of course I did not have. And I printed out my resume and matched it up. And I said, okay, look at all of these things I have to do so that when I do apply for this job, it will not be a question of whether or not I'm qualified. And so that's what led me to get my master's degree. That's what led me to do research, to do grants. I really used my English language fellow experience. There were 2 years there when people came around and I'm in Togo. I don't know how much you all know about Togo, but there's not a lot to do. So they were like, hey, you want to write a curriculum? And I was like, yep, exactly. That's exactly what I want to do. And I did as much as I could. And so when the Peace Corps opportunity came up, the basic concept and how I sold myself was like, look, I'm going to train new volunteers on what all of this stuff that I have already done. I guess my only regret looking back in life is that I didn't dream big enough because I finished that in my late 30s.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Wise thoughts and insights for us to ponder. Jillian, we'd love to hear from you.
Unlike Kevin, I did not map out my career at all. It was like, you know, gone, that type of a zigzag thing. But what I definitely loved was learning languages, and I wanted to teach them. So actually, originally, I wanted to teach German. I had gone to the University of Heidelberg, got my master's degree there, and I came back to the States ready to teach German, and I couldn't get a job. I was in San Francisco. Everybody in the whole world wants to live in San Francisco. So I was competing with native speakers there for any kind of German language related job. So make a long story short, I went back to Germany and I was immediately hired to teach English. And I found my mojo. I loved teaching English. And then I realized, wow, I can do this all over the world. But I have to go back to school now and get my master's in TESOL linguistics. So that's what I did, went back to the States. And but the only way I could get a teaching assistantship was to go into the doctoral program, which I really had no intentions. I just wanted to get the master's and then have my ticket to go around the world, right? But I went and did my doctorate, and actually that turned out to be one of the best things that happened to me, because I started a university career, and having that doctorate enabled me to be able to teach graduate courses and go into higher up administrative jobs. So that's my trajectory.
Thank you so much. Wise words about getting a doctorate and having that ticket to the world. Thank you for sharing. Nicholas, we'd love to hear from you.
I think I'm a little bit unconventional. It was a little bit by happenstance. I didn't come into the degree except for I was in a class and someone said, you seem to know a lot about language. You really should get into this field. And immediately took me over to the applied linguistics department. So I actually did get in, graduated, and started working. And while I was teaching, I got asked to do some administrative duties. And that went from being a teacher with a little bit of administrative to completely being a manager of the program. And then later I was headhunted to start a program at a different university. So my goal had always been to teach, and I've done more administration than teaching. And along the way, some of the things that I've had to do have just propelled me into other things. So the initial place where I was starting a new program, we did accreditation. And so that got on my resume. And then when I came to Arkansas, not Arkansas, I'm sorry, when I came here to Dayton, after having done my fellowship, they saw that on my CV and said, would you head up the accreditation for the program that I'm currently directing? And I started that and moved from accreditation coordinator to associate program manager to director of the program. So it's been a weird trajectory, not by plan.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nicholas. Sometimes the right things find us at the perfect time. So, Jeff, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'd like to second what you just said, Emily, how the right things find us at the perfect time. So when I was finishing my time at the university in Iraq that I mentioned, I was trying to get this very well-paying, somewhat prestigious job in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, actually. And I got there. It's a very long story, but basically they didn't let me in the country. There's some visa, passport problem, I don't know. But I had a couple of friends who had been fellows and specialists, and they suggested I apply to the program. And it was already very late. It was April, I think, at that point. But I applied, and it sort of set me off on a different trajectory from that point. So, you know, just like Jillian decided to further her career with a doctorate, I'm actually going a different route now. I've just started an MBA program because I see a lot of the skills of business, which I already have, but I'd like to fill in. I see those also applying a lot to administrative work and just running programs in general. So that's kind of where my trajectory is going now.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing. So now let's focus on your fellow and specialist experience. How did your fellow or specialist experience help to expand your career? Nicholas, let's hear from you first.
Sure. I think the way that it helped me most is having been a fellow and then also an alumni ambassador. It gave me the opportunity to network and meet with others. And through that networking and meeting people, I've been able to engage in some meaningful relationships that have put me in positions that I could be of service or expand upon my experience. So I've been asked to be on advisory committees, steering committees, make meaningful connections with other things that impact our program. For instance, having been a fellow in Oman, and now becoming the director, we had an instance of starting to have students from Oman to come into our ESL program, our IEP. And so when I reached out and met with the people who were in charge of that at the embassy, I was able to say, hey, I was a fellow in Oman, and we've had a great relationship with them ever since. And they, always send us students. And so that's been one good experience from that, and how it's been able to be impactful upon my career.
Thank you so much for sharing. Kevin, let's hear from you.
It's such a question in that the English language fellow program in my life, Togo, West Africa, got into my DNA and changed my fiber. I know that probably sounds weird, but like I actually went in one person and came out the other side another person. Expanded my view of not only teaching language, but curriculum and instruction across the board, and gave me all of the opportunities that I wanted. Of course, I wanted to travel. I don't think any of us are even here if we didn't like travel. So I did. I wanted to make an impact in Central America on the Isthmus. I am Salvadoran American, and I feel like I saw Mr. Kaminsky here today. I feel like we made a big difference on the Isthmus. And before I came to Cyprus, I was in talks to rewrite the curriculum for El Salvador, which is the motherland. I didn't complete that, but how did it expand my career? I mean, it was really everything to my career. It was the springboard.
Thank you for sharing. I see in the chat that Letty Banks agrees with you that we come off the fellowship as a different person. Thank you so much for sharing, Kevin. Jillian, let's hear from you.
Well, as an English language specialist, it was a shorter time, of course. My first gig in Indonesia was 2 weeks, and then in South Africa, it was 3 weeks. And as far as, yeah, I'm pretty stationary here at the university, and I was looking for opportunities to get out of my comfort zone, to go work with my colleagues in another country. And I would say that I kind of like Nicholas, is I came into administration without kind of happenstance. I never had any formal training in this position. And what the both of the assignments in Indonesia and South Africa had to do with program creation and dealing with upholding certain international standards when creating teacher education programs, and doing things like curriculum mapping, measurable outcomes. This is something that I had never done, and it was great. It gave me those skill sets. So, if I were to, and even though I know I'm not planning to leave, this is probably the end where I'm going to stay until I retire. But it's certainly, having that experience in program creation has opened up other opportunities for me professionally. So I thank and to this day, I'm still in contact with my colleagues at the Free State University in South Africa. Matter of fact, one of them reached out to me and asked if I would be a outside assessor of a dissertation. And so it's wonderful, to still be collaborating on with the people through the assignments that I had.
Thank you so much, Jillian. It's wonderful to hear that you're still connected with your host country, and that those connections have lasted. Jeff, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so just like Jillian said, the skills that I picked up were really important because for those of you who have finished fellowships and specialist assignments, you're often looked at as an expert on everything having to do with teaching English. And that means a lot of late night cramming, last minute searches to figure something out, making a quick presentation about it and just winging it. But I picked up so much that way, and I gained so many skills that I hadn't gained before because I had very deep experience in one particular setting with a very homogeneous group of students. And to be able to expand that out was really useful for my next step, which was here in New York at Pace University, which is a program or a department that has a lot of programs, a lot of partner universities. I think something like 20 of them from different countries, different types of students, different programs, different lengths. And so the more experience I had, the better it was for me, both in getting the job, but also in doing the job. And so being able to cite some of those skills I learned about, but also the connections I had from my fellowship and specialist position, they were really useful in both of those, like I said, getting and doing my job now.
Thank you so much, Jeff. On to our next question. Can you describe the hiring process in your office? Jillian, can you kick us off with answering?
All right. Well, I run the ESL program here, and if we have an opening, it's generally for a 3/4 or full-time position. And with the approval from the department head, we make an announcement on our HR site, but we don't advertise the opening in any other places, such as the Chronicle. And even if it's just on our website, I still get a sizable number of resumes, and they're from all over the country. So after the deadline, HR will send me the applications and I go through them, and I am obligated to select at least 3. And then to have a virtual or a face-to-face interview with them and check out their references. And once I've made my selection, the candidate meets with the department head. She gives her approval, and then she has her AA draft a contract letter.
Thank you so much. Jeff, what about your office?
Yeah, so it's very similar to Jillian as far as the back end goes, putting the job posting online and whatnot. But once it gets to me and I can read the cover letters and the resumes, I'm usually looking to hire for just one class. At that time, we do have a seniority system at my university, so people don't usually come in with a full-time schedule. So, and it's usually a very particular class, probably one of these partner programs that I mentioned. So I'm really looking both for a good fit in that program, but also in general, because I constantly have new programs coming up. I might need a class filled here and there. And so when I interview people and when I make hiring decisions, it's generally based first on what I need right now, but I also categorize people for what they might be interested in the future, what they might be able to do with other programs coming up. So I try to keep an open mind, and I try not to sort of deny or reject anyone unless it's really terrible, because there are always opportunities that come up as we go through any term.
Thank you so much. And Nicholas, what about your office?
Right. So similar to Jillian, we do have a posting throughout HR, but dissimilar is that I do actually post it out abroad beyond that. So Chronicle of Higher Education, regional NAFSA, higheredjobs.com, things like that. In some places also, I don't remember the names of them, but we try to do diversity inclusion. So we have some different organizations that we send out to for underrepresented populations. And after that, it gets posted and we get the applicants. And I have the wonderful privilege of seeing them first because I am in charge of applications. I'm the search committee chair. And it's kind of a holdover from when I was not the director. I was search committee chair. And so as I moved up, I just kept it. Probably should pass it on to someone else by now. But basically, it's just best practices in terms of what your credentials should be in terms of a MA TESOL or something that's very similar. For those who don't have those degrees, it's still possible. It's just that you need to have a master's degree with coursework, methods and approaches, general linguistics, grammars, SLA. We are accredited. So as a best practices and as part of our accreditation, we have to meet that criteria. And also just experience teaching in an IEP. And we go through a process of an initial vetting, which includes a transcript review and teaching philosophy. And then the second interview, if you're asked to come back, would be a teaching demonstration. We do have adjunct and full-time positions. Currently, we have not hired for a full-time in quite a while. We do have adjuncts position openings. We have one right now, so if anyone's interested, we have one course for the coming term that starts on March 15th that will more than likely roll over into more courses in the summer, and we're expecting to be expanding a little bit more in winter. So we are looking at hiring those. And I can say that getting your foot in the door as an adjunct would bode well for full-time employment. And we're thinking that we're going to see a rise back with enrollment again. And we're down kind of short, so we're going to start to need some full-time instructors. And we're similar to Jeff. I not only have my IEP program, I have a partner program that we work with. That's a bridge program that I have to do staffing for. So that is something that we're looking at as well.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. It's exciting that you'll be hiring. Maybe one of your future employees is on our call right now. Kevin, let's hear from you.
Well, I think this is where we had a bit of a bifurcation in that I run a HR and recruiting agency. You're talking about my hiring process, yeah? Because I was preparing for the next question. We have a variety of digital interventions. We use all the social media platforms. We use career boards. Of course, we have our own website. And then we bring thousands upon thousands of CVs in through what is called an applicant tracking system, which is an ATS is the word we use. And those are filtered up to the recruiting staff who vets already qualified candidates. We know they're qualified, but we're looking for culture fit. So we know our client, we've profiled our client. We meet with 10, 20 people and find people who are the best fit. And we send them off for the interview that everyone was talking about. So to see if that chemistry is there. And then hopefully, of course, we coach them to help them put their best foot forward. And if they're offered the job, we help them negotiate salaries and benefits, that sort of thing.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. On to our next question. What makes a candidate stand out? Nicholas, you can get us started.
Sure. So I have a couple of items, what are some positive things and what are some negative things in terms of a candidate. So positively, it's an application packet and an interview presence or responses that reflect a good fit for that person within our program. And also if the person is knowledgeable, adaptable, experienced, and appears to be a professional in the field. So those are some good things that bode well for a candidate. Some things that are negative are projecting a sense of entitlement for the position. We get that sometimes. You can imagine perhaps Dayton is not like a major city, but the university is a big deal in the city. And so if you can get a position there, you're kind of like set for life. And so it's one of those things. And I came from another location that was similar to that when I was in Arkansas. So, if you're at UD or if you're at Arkansas State, you're set for life. So sometimes you get applicants who feel a little bit entitled to getting that position, and that really does not come off well. Another one is glaring or blatant errors in the application packet or within the interview that illustrate that the applicant doesn't meet the minimum or preferred qualifications, such as, lack of attention to detail cover letters that are addressed to a different institution completely. You're, here at the University of Dayton, but your cover letter says, I'm really interested in that position at Champaign, at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. How did that happen? So those are some things that I just have as what stick out to me when I'm reviewing and vetting applications and applicants.
Thank you so much. Jillian, let's hear from you.
I agree with everything that Nicholas says. I can only add that because we also have teacher training programs here at NC State, that a candidate that has a doctorate would stand out to me because she or he or they would be able to teach in our graduate level courses, because we do have an MAT and ESL. We have an MA foreign languages with a concentration in TESOL. So someone with a doctorate would be really very attractive for that. And yeah, teacher training experience, which is something that ELFs and English language specialists bring with them. So that's a big plus for you. I'm always looking for somebody with that kind of background.
Teacher training. And we also have the Training of Trainers course for anyone who's a virtual fellow who's interested in gaining more skills for that. This just launched on Monday, but we can put a link if you haven't registered. There's still a chance to join. Jeff, let's hear from you. What makes candidates stand out to you?
So first, I would recommend that Training of Trainers course. I did that course and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good at putting together a lot of different aspects of teacher training that I had learned along the way. But yeah, as Jillian said, actually anyone who has been a fellow or a specialist, like they're going to come to the top of my pile of resumes. But really what I'm looking for, what makes you stand out to me, is showing me your work, showing me what you've done before. I get very little out of an interview. An interview will tell me if I'd want to have lunch with you, and it'll tell me how good you are in an interview. That's about it. But like a portfolio or lesson plans, different activities, just giving me an idea of how you would go about teaching whatever it is you have to do in the class. That's really important for me to make a decision and really know if you're a good fit. So that's really what I look for. So I would recommend to anyone to, make sure they have that available, take it to them to an interview, have a link to something like that online so that you can reference what you're talking about, maybe even in the interview, and say, oh, actually, here's an example of something that I did. I'm very impressed by that. I'm impressed by the professionalism of it, the time they put into it, and it also gives me a much better picture than how good they are at interviewing. That doesn't give me very much.
Thank you so much. And Kevin, what makes candidates stand out to you?
As a former hiring manager with the United States government overseas and DC, and also here, as I was preparing my notes, the only thing different I could say, I wrote down 3 things: attitude, attitude, and attitude. No one ever gets to my desk unless they're already qualified. And if they're not qualified, I don't want to see them. So what differentiates the people who do get to my desk is how they attack it with the attitude. And just a brief example, if someone were to come in and I say, why are you leaving your last employer? And they say, oh, they're so mean to me, but they start talking bad about them. Then in my head, I'm already like, oh no, like what are they going to talk like that about me as well later? Because I don't really want that. So that's like a simple example of what I'm talking about, but it's just really, to me, that's the big difference maker in the culture fit.
Thank you so much. Attitude, attitude, attitude. On to our next question. What are some of the questions you ask during interviews? Jillian, please get us started.
I think it really depends on what courses I need the candidate to teach. So I'm very specific in my questions. I'll ask, for example, tell me what your experience is teaching, we'll say, college writing. How would you address a problem as, we'll say, plagiarism? And I always like to hear them talk about a lesson that they taught that they thought was particularly successful. And I asked them what their teaching style would be, or their teaching philosophy, and what kind of professional goals do they have. And I think also, it was also occurred to me, it's kind of linked to the last question, is if the candidate's really done their research about the ESL programs at NC State, they will also, you know, they can really stand out. And when they say, for example, oh, I see that you have an online journal. I'd be really interested in getting involved with that. Yeah. So yeah, that would be definitely a big tip for all of you, is to do your research when you're applying for positions about the program.
Thank you so much. Research goes a long way. Jeff, let's hear from you.
Oh, sorry. So, you know, I just really want to get to know like the candidate and get to know their philosophy of teaching. So are they used to teaching from an outcomes-based curriculum? Are they used to making resources? Are they used to teaching a variety of levels and skills and these kinds of things? That's what I really need to get out of them in order to know if they're going to be a good fit in our program. If the answers they give me are about textbooks they've used and textbooks they liked and didn't like, or it's just a couple of, you know, random activities that don't seem to fit with anything, you know, I'm probably not getting much out of that, and I might not proceed to the next step. So if you can give me that, then I'm more likely to at least keep you in my keep pile, even if it's for later on. So I'd say really it's those objective-based outcomes and understanding how to create a course and even lesson plans around those.
Thank you so much, Jeff. The tips to stay in the keep pile are so helpful. Nicholas, let's hear from you.
I like to concur with what Jillian and Jeff have presented so far, and just go a little further and say, for us, we are looking to get from the candidate, you know, what is their experience and how does that fit into our program? And then also we're looking for certain things that we typically do or we think that are best practices. Jeff had mentioned before, communities of practice, and we're all familiar with that. We want teachers to be collaborative and work together, right? And not just be in a silo. And we want to know that people are facilitators for learning, that they have a student-centered approach, and that they are able to adapt and work with different audiences and are aware of the audience that they're working with, you know, students from different backgrounds. So that's what we try to do with the questions, to give people the opportunity to, in the forum, to actually present themselves and fill in those gaps for us for those two things. So that's pretty much it. I could give some specific questions, but that's really what the key thing is. So I would say, to Jillian's point, you know, researching and or either asking questions about what is it that your program does, what do you do, what's your learning management system like, and think about your experience and what you have in that field, in that area, and project how I would be able to work within that. Yes, you know, I don't use Isidore, but I have used WebCT or Blackboard or whatever, and I'm pretty adaptable to learning management systems. So knowing what your experience is and what you bring and how you can map that on to what's happening at the institution where you're applying.
Thank you so much. Very, very helpful advice. So we are approaching our last question in our panel. So at this time, if you have any questions that you would like to ask in our Q&A section, please do paste those into the chat and we'll have a chance to answer as many as we have time for in our live Q&A section. So our last question is there any other advice you have for people currently seeking jobs in the immediate climate? Jillian, let's hear from you first.
I say, and I'm going to chime in with what, and a little bit what Kevin said, with attitude, 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 with network, network, network. I mean, honestly, I would say that all the positions I was able to get were through connections. Matter of fact, the way I got this position was because I knew the woman who held it before. And she reached out to me and let me know that she was retiring and that they were going to announce an opening at NC State. And she encouraged me to go for it because she knew I was looking for a better position. So yes, relationship. And the other thing I would say, I mean, I'm only speaking from my, what I see in my realm, right? Is that I think having, one thing that people are looking for are expertise in teaching diverse populations, as well as experience in college level writing. There's a real need for people with writing expertise in academia. And another big one is teaching online.
Thank you so much. Relationship. Kevin, let's hear from you. What advice do you have?
Yeah, I think this is the piece that like really excites me. I wanted to tell everyone here at this panel and anyone listening after that in 2021, you need to game the system, right? I mean, we're using all of these computers and algorithms. They are computers and algorithms. And if you can figure them out, then you can float your name to the top of any ATS. How would you do that? You would ensure that your CV or resume is readable. You would make sure that it's in a .doc file. Most modern day systems obviously would read PDFs, but the older ones, some of the older and cheaper ones don't. So you want to be at the top, right? So figure out what you want to be known for and be at the top of that. Make sure to litter the internet with all of your work. Write the blog. When the English Language Fellow program reaches out to each of you and says, hey, do you want to share a story about? Yes, the answer is yes, you do. And you want to make sure your name's on it. I was telling the story earlier that like, if I have two candidates and they're both qualified and they both have great attitudes, and my colleague looks at me and says, so who are we going to hire, Kevin? And I hit the Google real quick. Nice one. I like that. I hit the Google and one person shows up and they're just everywhere. They were doing this, they were writing curriculum here, and the other person, I don't see them. Then who am I going to pick? Also, as an agency, I had somebody send me their CV in the format of a JPEG. We never saw it. So they never got called. So they never got the interview. So they never got the job. And that's a terrible idea. So what I'm saying to you is go the other way around. Ensure you understand how the systems work and just play the game. So I think that's my biggest advice.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Litter the internet with your positive impacts in the TESOL field. Great advice.
Litter.
Okay, Nicholas, let's hear from you.
Sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, I would echo what everyone else has said. And in addition to that, I will repeat the networking, but also flexibility and being aware of the paradigm that you're working in or seeking employment within, because that really makes a difference. What's the situation and setup like that you want to get in, and how can you best fit into that? Flexibility, knowing that, for instance, you may need to travel around the world to get to where you want to be or what you want to do, and or to initially start. It may be small steps. It may not come from one step to the next. You may have to go through A through K before you get to where you're going. So that kind of goes into flexibility, and then just awareness of what happens around you, how things are done. One other thing I would say in concert with that is working above what you're at. So if you're an incumbent and you're a teacher, you're interested in getting into administration, don't expect that just being a teacher and a position comes up that you're going to automatically get into that position. What is it that you're showing that says, I would be a good candidate for that? So start to either through your committee work or service to the department, start to do some of those things that fit into a position where you want to go, so that when things pop up, you're able to say, actually, I have some experience doing that. Don't just expect that someone will just want to put you into that and give you on-the-job training. That just rarely happens. It's usually the fact that you show that you have the propensity or the capacity and the experience to do those positions that you actually get put into them. So everything that everyone else has said, but also flexibility and knowing the paradigm that you're in and what works for that.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. And Jeff, we have just enough time for you to share.
All right, so I'll just kind of focus in a little bit and focus on what I think you could do now. And everyone on this call, you all have master's degrees in TESOL or education or something that made you eligible to be a fellow or specialist. So you don't have to worry about that. And I assume you're all doing all the things you need to do on your cover letters and whatnot. So I would look toward experience. And if you can't find a full-time job right now, that's all over. Like, everyone is like that. So really focus on gaining experience with different types of populations, maybe with refugees and with academic track students, and with partner programs, like I mentioned earlier, with a broad range of geographic locations. So one from Africa, one from Germany, one from Brazil, one from China. And they're out there and they're often looking for someone to take this class. It's sometimes difficult for me to find someone who only wants to teach 4 hours a week, but that 4 hours a week is another population you can put on your resume. It's more experience that broadens what you've done. And I really think that's going to be most important moving forward in the field, because IEP enrollment was declining even before the pandemic. And of course, it's way down now. And we don't know when it's going to be back up. It is somewhat cyclical, but we may be past the heyday on that. We really don't know. So a lot of programs have shifted towards this program-based, partnership-based revenue model to stay in business. And the more experience and the breadth of experience you can have that will make you marketable for that kind of position, the better it's going to be.
Thank you so much. Wonderful advice, so helpful. So it is time for our Q&A section. Nick is going to help me out with that, Nicholas Gordon. Nick, do we have any questions that we can answer?
Yes, in addition to all the great info and tips provided by our panelists, we've had some great questions in the chat box, so thank you. Jillian, a few people, Kitty, Molly, and Anna, have asked about your doctorate, both the subject of it and also, I think Kitty had more specific question. You could come in, Kitty, if you'd like, or it was about if you think it's worth it to pursue the doctorate based on the time and financial commitment and so forth.
All right. Well, I think that depends on what your goals are. If you want to go into academia, if you want to teach at a university or college, 4-year college, then you really should consider getting a doctorate. Now, my doctorate is actually a Doctor of Arts, and I got that in the 1980s at Syracuse University because they didn't have a PhD program in the area that I wanted to get it in. So they had a Doctor of Arts. But I would suggest that if you're interested in going into academia, that you consider getting a PhD in a related field such as second language acquisition, education with a TESOL concentration, applied linguistics. And if you do that, then make sure that they offer you a teaching assistantship. And that way it's paid for and you get a stipend to live on. I mean, that's the only way that I could be a student until I was 35 years old.
That's exactly how my mother got her PhD as well. And she taught for 20 years.
Right. So, so you won't go into debt if you have a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. And we here at North Carolina State University, you get a pretty good salary, and we have. I'm not a tenure track person. We have what now we call professional track. And that's more where the emphasis is on teaching and not on research, which is fine with me. I don't have the publication stress or anything like that. But the benefits are excellent. So yeah, I think if that's what you want to go into, that would make you very competitive.
Can I add a little bit to that real quick, Emily?
Please, Nicholas.
When you're looking at your PhD programs, make sure that they have a specific focus that is towards the career trajectory that you're looking for. So for instance, like med school, there's med schools that are really focused on doing rural development and things of that nature, not urban or what have you. Same thing with the PhD program. So there's some programs that are specifically that are geared towards teaching in an IEP or something like that, not just general language knowledge or what have you. So make sure you look to see what the specialization of the PhD program is. A lot of them right now are actually only accepting people if they can give you an assistantship. So if you aren't qualified to get an assistantship, because those aren't just given out, they actually you have to have ability to do things. Then you may not actually get into the program. The other thing is that there is money out there. Ford Foundation actually does full fellowships for PhD studies. You can either get it going into the PhD or after you've studied for a semester or a year. So I would look into that. Most of us would qualify because it's for underrepresented populations, and women fall within that. So check out the Ford Foundation for some additional funding. And that would be on top of any money that you get. So if your school gave you a TA-ship, you could also get the Ford Foundation and get extra money in your pocket.
Excellent. Thank you so
May I
much.
just say one really quick thing? That was perfect, Nicholas, what you said as far as looking at, a program that has certain focus areas. And just to give you an example, I hired my colleague who got her PhD at Chapel Hill, but it was interesting. She has a PhD in education, culture, curriculum, and change program with a focus in ESL bilingual education. So having such a breadth is great because she's now able to teach a whole array of types of graduate courses.
Thank you all so much. I see that it is at the top of the hour, but we are going to continue with a bit more Q&A because we've had some really wonderful questions come in and we want to make sure that we're able to answer those. So we'll continue Q&A. If we have time for breakout rooms, we may do that, but we'll focus on the Q&A for now. So Nick, any other questions that have come through?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And thank you, Nicholas, Kevin, and Jillian for those great insights. I think a question related to that came up from Anna. I know she had to run, but she's curious to watch the recording here, and I think it could help all of us. This is open to anyone on the panel. Any other additional tips for how to pursue educational leadership roles, or if you know of any hybrid positions that kind of work on a bit of teaching and perhaps leadership? I know you've touched on some of this.
Well, I'll chime in. Educational leadership is something I was always interested in. I don't know if Harvard it still has that educational doctorate or not. They used to, but I will say that in my career there were two really different paths. One of which was the government work. Well, English language fellow, the Peace Corps, etc. Worked with some Fulbrights here and there. that was always very stable, very well paid, very structured, retirement account. And then I had this whole other side thing where I was being offered to be the director of language academies in wherever, Central America, Indonesia. Sometimes the money was really there, but the structure was really low. So I guess when I'm looking at educational leadership, from my point of view, it always seemed to be two different paths, and what a person might be more comfortable with. They were looking for more structure. You might want to go back in that direction, or if they're a little bit more like, hey, I'm cool with, riding a motorcycle and whatever, then there's that whole other path out there that doesn't require a PhD, but more hands-on, on the feet on the ground experience. Those are my thoughts.
And I'd like to add to that, of a year and a half ago, something like that, we were hiring for my position in Westchester. I do the New York City programs at Pace University, but we also have a campus up there. And it was interesting being on that side of the hiring process as well, because we had over 100 applicants, and I would say 80 of them were very, very well qualified. But what we were really looking for wasn't necessarily experience in education leadership, but that they could demonstrate they had skills that could transfer there. So if you're applying for a position like that, or you're looking to get into a position like that, it's important to think about those admin type skills, whether it's leadership, like we mentioned, whether it's showing your ability to organize, your curriculum experience, in some cases your budgetary experience. And those experiences don't have to be in education, they can be somewhere else. And I think hiring managers will look at the whole picture, but you've really got to fill in the lines for them. You've got to make the connections for them to really see that.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin and Jeff, for those insights on some non-PhD holding workarounds. I think this could be valuable. And we have a good question from Kitty. Kitty, are you still with us? We'd love to hear from you if you want to ask your question.
I'm happy for you to ask it for me. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kitty. This goes to Jeff first, and anyone else on our panel as well. Jeff, maybe you saw in the chat, Kitty's asking, you mentioned about the portfolio, and she's running, is that a mandatory requirement, and does everyone, does HR see the materials and so forth? You can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it is true that the minimum materials requirements are there, like the CV, the resume, an unofficial transcript, that has to be there. But anything on top of that, the candidate can bring in what they want. And so I would say the best example of this I've seen, and I've seen it a few times, was when they posted to an about.me page or to a Google profile or document or something, and they've clearly listed out the skills of the position. It wasn't taken directly from my job listing, but it correlated pretty well. And they had links to videos from their classes. They had links to lesson plans, links to PowerPoints. And obviously I didn't spend an hour looking at all of that, although sometimes I would like to do that rather than what I'm doing day after day. But looking through it, seeing the breadth of what this person, I'm thinking of one in particular, had done. But you can do that in an interview as well. I would say at least half of the candidates I interview come in with a binder full of lesson plans, activities, and things like that. I would suggest kind of evolving that to be more interactive and showing more online, showing videos, showing those kinds of things to really show your work. Because when it comes down to it, that's what I want to see. I want to know that your work is going to be very good, more so than, like I said earlier, more so than I want to know if I would enjoy having lunch with you, which I'm sure I would.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Excellent. show some tangible work in addition to our wonderful lesson plans. And Nicholas, also I should mention, if anyone else has a question, we would love to hear from you now if you want to unmute. But there was another one for Nicholas. If you could talk a little bit about your onboarding process. Someone had mentioned they know in higher ed it can be different. So they're wondering how much support new teachers get from the university.
Right. So I followed in behind Jeff. He had mentioned something about his, kind of similar to what Jeff had said in the chat. We do have an onboarding process whereby, we do the regular HR things and get you done with that. And we have a orientation and do some practical logistical housekeeping types of onboarding. But beyond that, we do have community of practice in our program. So when you're teaching at a level, we coordinate you with the other instructors who are teaching in that level. We have like typically 5 courses per level. I'm sorry, 4 courses per level rather. And so we want to have you interacting laterally with the instructors who are teaching the courses at the other courses in that level, but also kind of like above and below, so that you're seeing what's happening with the courses in the level above and where students came from. And so we do that with what we call a curriculum. Oh my God, we just changed the name of it. I can't remember what it is, but it's curriculum team. So the teachers work together and do things. And then we also have our associate program manager who supervises our faculty, and you're assigned to a particular associate program manager, and they're there to support you when you first come in, and also ongoing throughout your tenure while you're an instructor with us. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicholas, for expanding on your chat box comments, and Jeff as well for the earlier comments on the topic. Anyone else care to ask? I see we have one more in the chat, or we'd love to hear from you. Come in. Emily, do we have time for one more?
We've got time for one more.
Time. This is for Nicholas and Jeff first, or anyone else who would like to chime in. Maybe you can see the question from Kitty in the chat box here. Again, we've heard from you a bit about administrative experience, but the question of volunteering or shadowing someone to learn, get the experience with it. Is that something you would recommend or have any insights on?
Right. Yeah, I would say, most times you have some type of, job description or what have you for service to the department. So if you could see where there's something there that's happening that you could say, hey, can I assist with this particular function, volunteer to help with that, or be on that committee if there's a formal committee for it. And that could be very helpful. So a lot of places, money is tight. And if they can not hire someone to do something, they'd be very happy to give it to someone who's competent and can get that work done and not have to pay additional salary. So I think there's work out there. And it would really reflect well in terms of you, whether it's there when something pops up or whether it's just something that's a CV builder that you could then take on somewhere else. But, we have things like being the student advisor, student activities coordinator, or working with at-risk students with academic progression, helping them out, all different kinds of things, to actual and other administrative work. There's ways that you could step up and volunteer and just speak with your director to see how you could do that. What would you say about that, Jillian? Do you think that would work in your area as well?
I don't know if I would want somebody shadowing me necessarily, but what I want to, I believe International TESOL does offer a certificate in EFL administration or something like that. So that would be another way you could get some specialized training.
Yeah, and I think it depends a lot on, sorry, Kevin, I think it depends a lot on whether you're already in the program or you're not. If you're not in our program, like HR would shoot that down so fast. Like I deal with the union as well. There's no way they would allow that. But if you are teaching in the program, to be honest, I wouldn't have someone shadow me, but just volunteering for more admin type tasks or doing something, above and beyond and sending it to people, it'll let you or let them know that you're interested in those types of tasks. So maybe if a curriculum meeting or curriculum committee is formed and an assessment evaluation committee is formed, these kinds of tasks, that kind of experience will help build up your skills for when a position might become open later on.
Yeah, I wanted to say two things, and one was to echo exactly what you had said earlier about showing your work, because I had said, market yourself digitally. I think the presumption there, and I just want to say that what you said is absolutely right. Do the work, like do the work. Do the work and then take pictures of it, take videos of it, and also put it online. And also, instead of bringing a binder, like maybe make a little blog website about it, But the other thing that I found valuable in my career path along that way was volunteer opportunities with um, refugee type centers in the towns that I lived in Baltimore and DC and Kentucky. I got to work with a lot of diverse populations. I got to practice my chops, like different skills that I could take into the classroom with me. And it was also, I think, demonstrated what type of teacher I am on my CV. And so when I met with other hiring officials like the ones that are here today, I could talk about, the work I did on Saturday night at 7 with the Burmese community down the road and the different activities we did. And that really seemed to be a conversation starter. Those additional thoughts.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. We are out of time, so we're going to just have our wrap up announcements now. And if you have any questions that weren't answered, we encourage you to continue the conversation on the community of practice. A recording of this will be posted, and we can continue to ask questions there and engage with each other in the comments underneath the recording. So we invite you to our upcoming online community events. On Tuesday, March 9th, we have View from the Real World Panama. On Thursday, March 18th, we have the next session in our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series, which will be a conversation on Where Are You From with Robert Lyer. Your feedback matters. Nick is going to post a link in the chat where you can provide feedback on this online community event and also share any ideas you might have for what future online events you would like to see. And with that, we thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that this session was engaging and informative, and we wish you all of the best as you expand your TESOL careers and make a difference in your community, nation, and world. Have a wonderful day, evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world.